The morning announcement echoed through the halls of the Galactic Military Academy like a thunderclap. Students from dozens of worlds stopped their conversations and turned toward the speakers mounted on every wall. Effective immediately, the voice of Commander Vex announced, human cadets are banned from all advanced combat simulation programs. This decision comes after careful review of recent incidents involving excessive violence and unpredictable behavior patterns during training exercises. Jiho sat in the cafeteria, his spoon frozen halfway to his mouth. The warm soup he had been enjoying suddenly tasted like nothing. Around him, alien students began to whisper and point in his direction. Some were trying to hide their smiles, but he could see the satisfaction in their eyes. At the table next to him, Taman, a tall Vorthak student with blue-scaled skin and sharp yellow eyes, stood up and laughed loudly. Finally, he said, his voice carrying across the cafeteria, the academy has come to its senses. Humans are too primitive for real military training. Other alien students nodded and joined in the laughter. Jiho felt his face grow hot with embarrassment, but he kept eating his soup. He had learned not to react to such comments during his 2 years at the academy. Minji, another human cadet, slid into the seat across from Jiho. Her dark eyes were angry, but she kept her voice low. Did you hear that announcement? Everyone heard it, Jiho replied quietly. Half the cafeteria is celebrating. Minji looked around at the alien students who were still talking excitedly about the ban. They think we're savages, she said. They think we can't control ourselves during training? Maybe they're right, Jiho said, stirring his soup slowly. You remember what happened last month in the urban warfare simulation? The entire training facility had to be rebuilt. That wasn't our fault, Minji argued. The scenario was impossible. We did what we had to do to complete the mission. Taman walked over to their table, flanked by 2 other alien students. One was Nara, a green-skinned Keltharian with large, kind eyes. The other was Rock, a massive Grundian who looked like a walking boulder. Having trouble accepting reality, humans? Taman asked with a wide grin that showed his sharp teeth. Your species is finally being recognized for what it truly is. And what's that? Minji asked, looking up at him with steady eyes. Violent animals, Taman replied. You destroy everything you touch. You can't think beyond hitting things harder or shooting more bullets. Real military strategy requires intelligence and finesse. Nara looked uncomfortable. Taman, maybe you should leave them alone, she said softly. Why? Taman turned to face her. They need to understand their place. This academy is for civilized species who can handle advanced warfare concepts, not for primitives who think every problem can be solved with brute force. Jiho finally looked up from his soup. You're entitled to your opinion, he said calmly, but the academy made its decision. We'll accept it. This seemed to frustrate Taman even more. He had clearly expected an angry reaction. That's it? You're just going to accept being labeled as unfit for military service? What choice do we have? Jiho asked. Fight you here in the cafeteria? Prove your point about us being violent? Rock laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Smart human, knows when he's beaten. Other alien students had gathered around to watch the confrontation. Jiho could see species he had never even learned the names of, all watching with curious eyes. Some looked sympathetic, but most seemed to agree with Taman. The funny thing, Taman continued, is that I heard there's footage of why you humans were banned. Apparently the incidents were so bad that they classified the recordings. Footage? Asked a student from across the cafeteria. Oh yes, Taman said, enjoying the attention. I heard from a friend who works in the archives that there are videos of human training sessions that went wrong, really wrong. The kind of wrong that gets people hurt. Minji's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Jiho put a gentle hand on her arm, warning her to stay calm. I bet, Taman went on, that if we could see those videos, we'd understand exactly why humans don't belong in advanced military training. Probably shows them losing control completely. Maybe crying. Maybe running away when things got difficult. The crowd of alien students laughed at this suggestion. The idea of tough-looking humans crying during training seemed hilarious to them. Well, said a voice from the edge of the crowd. We'll never know, will we? The footage is classified. This was Instructor Kyung, a middle-aged Zephyrian with silver skin and patient eyes. The crowd of students immediately stepped back and tried to look busy with other things. Instructor Kyung, Taemin said, suddenly much more respectful. We're just discussing the new policy. I heard, Kyung replied, and I think you've discussed it enough. Everyone should return to their dormitories and prepare for tomorrow's classes. The alien students began to disperse, but their excited chatter continued. Jiho could hear fragments of their conversations as they walked away. Classified footage. Must be really bad. Finally banned. About time. When most of the students had left, Kyung approached Jiho and Minji's table. I'm sorry about this decision, the instructor said quietly. I know it's not fair to judge an entire species based on a few incidents. A few incidents? Minji asked. How many incidents were there? Kyung hesitated. 3 major ones in the past year. Each time, human cadets exceeded the parameters of the training scenarios. What does that mean? Jiho asked. It means you completed impossible missions using methods that the Academy found concerning, Kyung explained. The review board decided that human tactical thinking is too unpredictable for standard military training. So we're being punished for being too good at the simulations? Minji asked incredulously. You're being removed from combat training. Because your methods disturbed the other cadets and the instructors, Kyung said carefully. The review board felt that continued exposure to human tactical approaches might have negative effects on other species. Jiho frowned. Negative effects? Some of the alien cadets who witnessed your training sessions reported nightmares, Kyung admitted. Others became overly aggressive in their own simulations, trying to copy your methods. So instead of teaching others to be better, they're removing us from the program? Minji asked. The Academy has decided it's safer this way, Kyung said. You'll still receive theoretical training in military history, strategy, and logistics, just no more hands-on combat simulations. After Kyung left, Jiho and Minji sat in silence for several minutes. The cafeteria was now mostly empty, with just a few students finishing their meals. Theoretical training, Minji said finally, like we're studying ancient history instead of preparing for real military service. Maybe it's for the best, Jiho said. If our methods really are disturbing other species, maybe we shouldn't be sharing them. Or maybe, Minji replied, other species need to learn that sometimes disturbing methods are necessary methods. As they left the cafeteria, they could hear laughter and conversation coming from the dormitory common rooms. The alien students were clearly still excited about the human ban, and Jiho suspected this was just the beginning of their problems at the Academy. He was right. Over the next few days, the mocking only got worse. Everywhere Jiho and Minji went, they heard whispered comments about human violence and stupidity. Taemin seemed to take particular pleasure in making loud jokes whenever they were nearby. But beneath the mockery, Jiho noticed something else. Curiosity. The alien students kept mentioning the classified footage, wondering what it showed. Their jokes about human incompetence had an edge of uncertainty to them, as if they weren't quite as confident as they pretended to be. Something about those classified videos had the Academy worried enough to ban an entire species from combat training, and that something was making the alien students more curious every day. 2 weeks after the ban, the whispers had grown into something much bigger. Every day, more alien students gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices about the mysterious human footage that supposedly justified their removal from combat training. Taemin had become the unofficial leader of these discussions. He spent his free time trying to gather information from anyone who might know something about the classified recordings. His confidence about human inferiority had grown even stronger, fed by the assumption that the footage must show humans failing spectacularly. My cousin works in the communications department, Taemin announced to a group of students in the recreation room. She says the files are stored in the deepest part of the security archives, the kind of place they put things that are too embarrassing or dangerous to ever see daylight. Nara, who had been listening to these conversations for days, finally spoke up. Maybe we shouldn't be trying to see classified material. If it's locked away, there might be good reasons. Good reasons? Taemin laughed. The only good reason is that the Academy doesn't want us to see how pathetic humans really are in combat situations. They're probably trying to protect human feelings. Rock nodded his massive head. Makes sense. Humans are emotional creatures. They probably cried when they lost the training exercises. Or maybe, said a new voice, they hurt someone. The speaker was Dal, a quiet Xerian student with pale, almost translucent skin. He rarely spoke during these group discussions, which made everyone pay attention when he did. What do you mean? Taemin asked. Think about it, Dal continued. The Academy doesn't ban species for being bad at combat training. They give extra help, additional instruction, remedial courses. But they ban species that are dangerous. Dangerous to who? Asked Nara. To other students, to instructors, to the training facilities themselves, Dal replied. Remember what Instructor Kyung said? The human training methods disturbed other species, made them have nightmares, made them too aggressive. The room fell quiet as the students considered this possibility. The idea that humans might be banned not for weakness but for being too intense was unsettling. That's ridiculous, Taemin said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Humans are primitive. They use brute force because they don't understand sophisticated tactics. Then why, Dal asked, are the Academy instructors afraid to show us the footage? Meanwhile, across the campus, Jiho and Minji were dealing with their new reality. Theoretical military classes were boring compared to the hands-on combat simulations they used to participate in. Instead of leading tactical exercises and solving complex battlefield problems, they spent their days reading about ancient wars and memorizing logistics formulas. I miss the simulations, Minji said as they walked between classes, even if they were intense. I know, Jiho replied, but maybe this is better. We don't have to worry about other students getting upset by our methods. Our methods, Minji repeated. They make it sound like we were doing something wrong, weren't we? Jiho asked. Instructor Kyung said we exceeded the parameters of the scenarios. Maybe we were too aggressive. Minji stopped walking. Jiho, those scenarios were designed to test our limits. We were supposed to find ways to win impossible situations. That's what military training is for. But if our solutions were scaring other species, then maybe other species need to learn what real warfare looks like. Minji said firmly. War isn't polite. It isn't neat and clean. Sometimes you have to do things that make people uncomfortable. They talked. They didn't notice Nara walking behind them, listening to their conversation. The Keltharian student had been growing more curious about the human perspective ever since the ban was announced. That evening, Nara found herself thinking about what she had overheard. The humans didn't sound like primitive brutes. They sounded like soldiers who took training seriously. Maybe too seriously for the Academy's comfort. She decided to do some research of her own. The Academy library had extensive records of training incidents, though nothing about the specific human cases. But it did have historical records of other species that had been restricted or banned from certain programs over the years. What she found was interesting. Most restrictions were for species that couldn't handle the physical or mental demands of military training. But there were a few cases of restrictions placed on species that were too successful, too adaptable, or too willing to push boundaries. One case particularly caught her attention. 50 years ago, a species called the Krathari had been banned from pilot training after they consistently found ways to win dogfighting simulations that had been designed to be unwinnable. The Krathari pilots had developed tactics so aggressive and unconventional that other species began copying them, leading to an increase in training accidents. The parallel to the human situation was obvious. Maybe the humans weren't banned for failing. Maybe they were banned for succeeding too well. Back in the recreation room, Taemin was still holding court with his theories about human incompetence. But his audience was smaller now, and some of the students looked skeptical. I heard something interesting today, said Yuki, a Delphian student with large dark eyes. I was talking to my instructor about defensive tactics, and when I mentioned the human ban, she got very quiet. Then she said something strange. What? Taemin asked. She said that sometimes the most dangerous warriors are the ones who refuse to accept that a battle is lost. The room was silent. Finally, Dal spoke up again. "My brother graduated from this academy 5 years ago," he said slowly. "He's serving on a border patrol ship now. Last time I talked to him, he mentioned serving alongside some human officers." "So?" Taman asked, though he was starting to look uncomfortable. "He said they were the best tactical minds he'd ever worked with, said they could find solutions to problems that other species couldn't even understand. But he also said..." Dal paused. "He said they scared him sometimes." "Scared? Him how?" "They never gave up. Ever. Even when the situation was hopeless, even when everyone else wanted to retreat, the humans would keep fighting, keep finding new ways to attack. My brother said it was like serving alongside people who didn't understand the concept of defeat." Nara felt a chill run down her spine. "That doesn't sound primitive," she said quietly. "No," Dal agreed, "it doesn't." Taman stood up abruptly. "This is all speculation," he said loudly. "We don't know anything for certain until we see that footage, and I intend to see it." "How?" asked Rock. "Leave that to me," Taman replied. "I have some ideas." Over the next few days, Taman began reaching out to students in technical programs, looking for someone who might be able to access the Academy's restricted files. He was careful not to reveal his true purpose, instead claiming he needed help with a research project. He found his answer in Kato, a brilliant young Nexian who specialized in computer systems. Kato was small and quiet, but his technical skills were legendary among the students. More importantly, he was curious enough about the human footage to agree to help. "It won't be easy," Kato warned as they met in a secluded corner of the library. "The security archives have multiple layers of protection, and if we get caught, we'll be expelled." "The Academy won't expel us for satisfying academic curiosity," Taman said. "We're just trying to understand why they made this decision about humans." Kato looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll need some time to study their security systems, maybe a week or two." "Fine," Taman said. "But keep this quiet. I don't want word getting back to the instructors." As they made their plans, neither Taman nor Kato noticed Nara sitting at a nearby table, her keen Keltharian hearing picking up every word of their conversation. She felt torn between curiosity and concern. Part of her wanted to see the footage, too, to understand what had really happened during those human training sessions. But another part of her wondered if some secrets were better left alone. If the Academy had gone to such lengths to hide this footage, maybe there were good reasons beyond just protecting human feelings. Still, as she watched Taman's determined expression, she realized that nothing was going to stop him from seeing those recordings. And if he was going to view them anyway, maybe it was better if someone with a more open mind was there to witness whatever they contained. The whispers continued to grow. More students joined the informal groups discussing the human ban. Theories became wilder and more elaborate. Some students now believed the footage showed humans committing atrocities during training. Others thought it revealed military secrets too dangerous for most species to know. But a few students, like Nara and Dal, were beginning to suspect the truth might be something entirely different. Something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about human capabilities and the real reasons behind the Academy's decision. The stage was set for a revelation that would change how every alien student viewed their human classmates. 3 weeks after first proposing the idea, Kato finally announced that he was ready. He had spent countless hours studying the Academy's security systems, mapping their weaknesses, and developing a plan to access the restricted archives. "Tonight," he told Taman in a quiet corner of the engineering lab. "The maintenance cycle runs from midnight to 3 in the morning. That's when security monitoring is at its lowest level." Taman felt his heart racing with excitement. Finally, he would have proof of human incompetence. Finally, he could show everyone exactly why these primitive creatures had been banned from real military training. "How many people can we bring?" he asked. "The fewer the better," Kato replied. "But I understand you want witnesses, maybe 4 or 5 others at most." Taman nodded. He had already decided who to invite. Rock, of course, his most loyal supporter. Dal, whose recent doubts about human primitiveness needed to be corrected. And perhaps surprisingly, Nara, whose growing sympathy for humans was becoming annoying. What about viewing equipment? Taman asked. There's a small presentation room in the archives section, Cato explained. It has projection systems for reviewing classified material. We can watch everything there. That evening, word spread quietly through the dormitories. Taman had been careful to select students who shared his views about human inferiority, but he also included a few who had expressed doubts. He wanted converts as well as supporters. By 11:30, a group of 12 alien students had gathered in an empty classroom near the archives. Taman looked around at the faces in the dim light. Some looked excited. Others appeared nervous. A few seemed to be having second thoughts. Remember, Taman said quietly, we're doing this for academic purposes. We need to understand the Academy's decision-making process. We're not stealing anything or trying to cause trouble. But we are breaking into classified files. Nara pointed out. That's definitely against Academy regulations. Rules that hide the truth from students are bad rules, Taman replied. We have a right to know why our classmates were banned. Cato checked his portable computer one more time. The security systems are cycling now, he announced. We have a 40-minute window before the next full scan. They moved through the darkened hallways like ghosts. The Academy at night felt different, larger, more mysterious. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to follow them as they walked. The archives building was separate from the main campus, connected by a covered walkway. Cato led them through a service entrance that his research had identified as the least monitored. His hands shook slightly as he worked on the electronic lock, but after several tense minutes, it clicked open. We're in, he whispered. The archives were vast. Row after row of data storage units hummed quietly in the darkness. Cato led them deeper into the building, following a route he had memorized from the Academy's technical blueprints. Here, he said, stopping at a terminal marked with high security warnings. This is where they keep the classified training recordings. As Cato worked to bypass the security protocols, the other students stood around nervously. Some were beginning to question the wisdom of their adventure. Maybe we should reconsider this, Dal said quietly. If they find out we were here, they won't find out, Taman replied confidently. And even if they do, what's the worst thing that could happen? We get a lecture about respecting classified materials? Expulsion? Nara said bluntly. The worst thing that could happen is expulsion. For satisfying scientific curiosity? Taman laughed, though the sound was strained in the quiet archives. The Academy encourages independent learning. Not this kind of independent learning, Nara muttered. Got it, Cato announced suddenly. I'm into the system. Now I just need to find the specific files related to human training incidents. The terminal screen flickered to life, showing directory after directory of classified materials. Cato navigated through layers of security folders until he found what they were looking for. Human combat training, restricted access, he read aloud. Multiple files dating back 8 months. How many files? Taman asked, leaning over Cato's shoulder. Looks like 7 major incident reports, each with corresponding video footage. Cato's expression grew troubled as he read the file names. Some of these have really unusual labels. Like what? Operation names, Cato replied. These aren't just training exercises. They're labeled like real military operations. Kepler Defense, Crimson Dawn, Last Light Protocol. Dal frowned. Training exercises don't usually have operation names. Maybe they do for advanced scenarios, Taman said, though he sounded less certain than before. Let's just download everything and get to the viewing room. As Cato transferred the files, several of the students began to look uncomfortable. The operation name sounded too serious, too real for simple training exercises. Taman, Nara said, softly, maybe we should just take a quick look at one file, just to make sure this is what we think it is. We'll look at all of them, Taman replied firmly. I want everyone to see exactly what humans are like under pressure. The file transfer, took longer than expected. As they waited, the students could hear the normal sounds of the academy at night. The hum of ventilation systems, the distant footsteps of security patrols, the electronic beeping of various automated systems. Finally, Cato announced that the download was complete. They made their way to the small presentation room he had identified earlier. The room was designed for reviewing classified materials, with comfortable seating and high-quality projection equipment. As they settled into their chairs, Taman felt a surge of triumph. Soon, he would have definitive proof that humans were unfit for military service. The Academy's decision to ban them would be vindicated, and all the recent doubts and speculation would be put to rest. "Which file should we start with?" Cato asked, connecting his portable computer to the room's projection system. "Start with the oldest one," Taman suggested. "Let's see how this pattern of human failure developed over time." The first file appeared on the screen. Kepler Defense Training Exercise, 7741 Alpha, Human Participants Cadets, Seokjin Park, Hana Kim, others. "Wait," Nara said suddenly. "Seokjin Park, that's Jiho's older brother. He graduated 2 years ago." "And Hana Kim," added another student. "That's Minji's sister. I've heard her mention Hana before." Taman waved away their concerns. "So, maybe failure runs in human families. Let's just watch the footage." But as the video began to load, several students were already feeling uneasy. The operation names, the involvement of students who had already graduated, the high level of security around these files, nothing quite matched their expectations of simple training failures. "Here we go," Cato announced as the first images appeared on the screen. The footage began with what looked like a standard military briefing room. Human and alien officers were seated around a table, studying holographic displays of what appeared to be a planetary surface. "This is Kepler Station," a human voice was saying off camera. "Population 40,000 civilians. Strategic value, minimal. Current threat level, extinction class." The students in the viewing room exchanged glances. Extinction class? That was a designation reserved for threats to entire populations. "Wait," Dal said slowly. "This doesn't look like a training exercise." On screen, the briefing continued. The holographic display showed massive alien ships approaching Kepler Station. The vessels were unlike anything the students had ever seen in their textbooks. Dark, angular craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Unknown hostiles detected at 0600 hours. The briefing continued. "Species unidentified. Technology level significantly beyond current galactic standards. Estimated time to planetary bombardment, 6 hours. Taman felt his confidence beginning to waver. This was too detailed, too realistic for a training scenario. The alien ships in the display looked genuinely threatening, and the human officers in the briefing were showing signs of real stress. "I don't think this is training footage," Nara said quietly. "Of course it is," Taman replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "They're just very good at creating realistic scenarios." The video continued. Orders were being given for civilian evacuations. Ships were being deployed. Resource allocations were being calculated down to the last ammunition count. Everything had the desperate efficiency of real military planning under extreme time pressure. And then they saw him. Seokjin Park, Jiho's older brother, stepping forward to volunteer for what the commanding officer had just described as a suicide mission with negligible chance of success. "Sir," Seokjin said on the recording, "my team can buy the evacuation, ships more time. We just need to hold the main defensive positions until the last civilian transport clears the atmosphere." "Son," the older officer replied, "those positions can't be held. The enemy has overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. You'd be going up against impossible odds. Then we'll have to make the impossible possible," Seokjin answered calmly. In the viewing room, 12 alien students sat in stunned silence. This was not what any of them had expected to see. This was not training footage showing human incompetence. or emotional breakdown. This was something else entirely, and they were only just beginning to understand what they had stumbled upon. The presentation room fell completely silent as the true nature of the footage became clear. These were not training exercises. These were real military operations, recorded during actual combat situations. On screen, Seokjin Park was leading a team of human soldiers toward defensive positions around Kepler Station. The camera followed them as they moved through corridors filled with panicking civilians trying to reach evacuation ships. "This can't be real," Taemin whispered, but his voice shook with uncertainty. Dal leaned forward in his chair, studying the footage carefully. "Look at the timestamp," he said. "This was recorded 8 months ago. And look at the tactical displays. Those are real orbital patterns, real ship movements." The camera view switched to an external shot of Kepler Station. In the distance, dark, alien vessels were approaching like storm clouds. Their ships were massive, each one larger than a city. The evacuation transports fleeing the station looked like tiny insects by comparison. "Evacuation status report." Seokjin's voice crackled over the communication system. 40% complete, came the reply. "We need at least 3 more hours to get everyone out." "Understood. We'll buy you the time." What followed was unlike anything the alien students had ever seen in their military training. Seokjin and his team didn't just defend their positions. They turned the entire defensive scenario into an aggressive campaign. Using the station's industrial equipment, they created improvised weapons. They redirected power from non-essential systems to strengthen their shields. They even used the station's waste disposal system to launch surprise attacks on approaching enemy scouts. "How are they doing that?" Nara asked in amazement. On screen, human soldiers were welding pieces of mining equipment together to create mobile barriers. They were reprogramming civilian robots to carry explosives. They were turning every piece of available technology into a weapon or a tool. "They're improvising," Dal said, his voice filled with awe. "They're taking equipment designed for peaceful purposes and turning it into military assets." The enemy forces reached the station. The battle that followed was intense and desperate. The dark alien ships deployed soldiers that moved like liquid shadow, flowing through corridors and attacking from unexpected angles. But the humans adapted. When conventional weapons proved ineffective, they switched to improvised solutions. When their defensive positions were overrun, they fell back to new positions they had prepared in advance. When their communications were jammed, they developed hand signals and used light patterns to coordinate their attacks. "Look at their faces," Nara said quietly. The human soldiers on screen were focused and calm, even in the midst of chaos. While explosions erupted around them and enemy forces pressed closer, they continued to execute complex tactical maneuvers with precision. "They're not panicking," Rock said in disbelief. "Even with those things attacking them, they're not panicking." Theory. Dark alien forces were unlike anything in the Academy's textbooks. They moved without sound, attacked without warning, and seemed to absorb energy weapon fire without taking damage. Any conventional military force would have been overwhelmed in minutes, but the humans kept fighting. More importantly, they kept learning. With each enemy attack, they developed new countermeasures. When energy weapons proved useless, they switched to kinetic projectiles. When the enemies adapted to kinetic weapons, the humans began using environmental hazards, explosive decompression, electrical systems, even gravity itself. "Evacuation status?" Seokjin called out during a brief lull in the fighting. 70% complete. 1 more hour. "Copy that. We're moving to secondary defensive positions." The secondary positions were even more impressive than the first. The humans had turned an entire section of the station into a maze of traps, improvised weapons, and kill zones. They were using the enemy's superior technology against them, channeling the dark forces into areas where human ingenuity could overcome alien advantages. Taemin watched in growing horror as his assumptions about human primitiveness crumbled. These soldiers weren't using brute force. They were using intelligence, creativity, and tactical thinking that surpassed anything he had seen in his academy classes. "They're brilliant," he whispered, almost against his will. The battle reached Its climax as the enemy forces made a final push toward the evacuation bays. Seokjin and the remaining human soldiers were vastly outnumbered and running low on ammunition. Final evacuation transport departing in 10 minutes, came the announcement over the communication system. Understood, Seokjin replied. All teams, implement last light protocol. The alien students didn't understand what last light protocol meant until they saw it in action. The remaining human soldiers spread throughout the station, each taking positions at critical structural points. They're going to destroy the entire station, Dal realized. They're going to take out the enemy forces by collapsing the whole structure. But they'll be caught in it too, Nara said in horror. On screen, Seokjin was setting charges on the main power core while enemy forces closed in around him. His team members were doing the same thing at other vital points throughout the station. All civilian transports clear, came the final announcement. Station destruction in 30 seconds. Copy that, Seokjin replied calmly. It's been an honor serving with you all. The explosion was visible from space. Kepler Station, along with the massive enemy ships that had been trying to capture it, disappeared in a brilliant flash of light. The recording ended. The presentation room was completely silent. 12 alien students sat staring at the blank screen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. They saved 40,000 people, Nara said finally, her voice barely a whisper. And they knew they were going to die doing it, added Dal. Taemin felt sick. Everything he had believed about humans, everything he had said about their primitiveness and incompetence, had been completely wrong. The footage they had just seen showed tactical brilliance, selfless courage, and innovative thinking that exceeded anything in his species' military history. Play the next file, he said quietly. Taemin, Nara said gently. Maybe we should play it, he repeated more firmly. I need to see more. Kato loaded the next file. Operation Crimson Dawn, Rescue Mission Vega 7. Human participants, Cadet Hana Kim, others. This footage began differently. Instead of a briefing room, it opened on what appeared to be a battlefield. Alien civilians, including some that looked like Taemin's own species, were trapped in a damaged settlement while hostile forces surrounded them. Wait, Rock said suddenly, pointing at the screen. Those civilians, they're Vorthak. My people. Taemin leaned forward, studying the footage more carefully. The civilians on screen did indeed appear to be Vorthak, trapped in what looked like a mining colony under attack by unknown hostiles. This was during the Vega Sector crisis, Dal realized. My brother mentioned this. A Vorthak colony was attacked by raiders, but I thought Vorthak military forces handled the rescue. Keep watching, Kato said quietly. On screen, Hana Kim was leading a small team of human soldiers through dangerous terrain to reach the trapped civilians. The raiders had superior numbers and better defensive positions. Any conventional rescue attempt would have been suicide. But like her brother's team at Kepler Station, Hana's squad refused to accept conventional limitations. They used the planet's natural geology to their advantage, creating underground routes to bypass enemy positions. They turned the raiders' own defensive preparations against them, and most importantly, they treated the alien civilians they were rescuing as if they were their own people. Look how they're treating the Vorthak children, Nara observed. Human soldiers were carrying injured Vorthak civilians to safety, sharing their own medical supplies and food rations, even giving up their protective equipment to shield alien families from enemy fire. Taemin watched a human soldier, barely older than himself, give his only breathing mask to a young Vorthak child, then continue fighting in the toxic atmosphere without protection. They're dying to save people they've never met, he said in disbelief. Aliens they've never met. The rescue operation was a success, but at enormous cost. More than half of Hana's team died getting the Vorthak civilians to safety. The survivors continued fighting until every single alien family had been evacuated. As this second video ended, the alien students in the presentation room began to understand the true scope of their mistake. These weren't training failures. These were examples of human military service that exceeded the highest standards of any species in the galaxy. "How many more files are there?" asked a student who had barely spoken all evening. Cato checked his computer. 5 more major operations, plus dozens of smaller incident reports. "Show us another one," Taman said, his voice hollow with shame. But even as they prepared to view more footage, all 12 students knew that everything they thought they understood about humans had been completely wrong, and they were only beginning to learn just how wrong they had been. By the third video, the alien students had stopped making comments. They sat in stunned silence as operation after operation revealed the same disturbing truth. Humans weren't banned from combat training because they were incompetent. They were banned because they were terrifyingly effective. The third recording showed Operation Iron Shield, where a small human unit had defended a medical station against overwhelming odds. The fourth displayed Broken Arrow Protocol, a rescue mission where human soldiers had extracted alien diplomats from a war zone that 3 other species had declared impossible to enter. Each video was worse than the last, not because the humans failed, but because they succeeded using methods that defied every conventional understanding of military tactics. "They don't retreat," Dal said quietly as they watched footage of human soldiers holding positions long after any sane military commander would have ordered a withdrawal. "Even when the situation is hopeless, they don't retreat. They adapt too, quickly," added Nara, watching humans turn everyday objects into weapons with frightening efficiency. "They see a problem and immediately start looking for solutions that no one else would ever consider." Taman said nothing. He couldn't speak. Everything he had believed about human primitiveness was crumbling as he watched these recordings. These weren't primitive brutes using overwhelming force. These were tactical geniuses using creativity and determination to achieve impossible victories. The fifth video was labeled Sanctuary Crisis, Keltharian Evacuation. When Nara saw her own species' name in the title, she gripped her chair arms tightly. "I remember this," she said. "It happened on my homeworld 3 years ago. There was a massive industrial accident that threatened to poison an entire continent. But I thought our own emergency services handled the evacuation." The footage began with scenes of chaos. A chemical plant explosion had released toxic clouds that were spreading rapidly across populated areas. Millions of Keltharian civilians needed to be evacuated before the poison reached them. On screen, human officers were working alongside Keltharian officials, coordinating the largest evacuation in galactic history. But the scale was impossible. There simply weren't enough ships, enough time, or enough resources to move everyone to safety. Standard evacuation protocols estimate 60% civilian casualties, a Keltharian official was saying in the recording. "We cannot save them all." "Unacceptable," replied a human commander. "We'll save them all." "Commander, with respect, the numbers don't work. We don't have enough transport capacity." "Then we'll make more capacity." What followed was a demonstration of human logistics capability that left the alien students speechless. The humans began retrofitting cargo ships, pleasure craft, and even industrial vessels to carry civilians. They reprogrammed automated systems to maximize efficiency. They created transportation schedules that used every available minute and every possible route. But most impressively, they refused to accept the mathematics of the situation. When calculations showed that certain remote settlements couldn't be reached in time, human volunteers took personal shuttles and made impossible flights through toxic storms to save isolated families. "They saved everyone," Nara whispered as the video showed the final evacuations. "Every single person on that continent survived." "How?" asked Rock. The poison clouds were spreading faster than the evacuations. On screen, they could see the answer. Human pilots were flying through toxic atmosphere that should have killed them. Human engineers were working without protective equipment to keep transport systems running. Human medics were treating alien civilians while breathing poison themselves. They were dying to save us, Nara realized. The humans were literally poisoning themselves to death to save Keltharian civilians they had never met. The casualty reports at the end of the recording confirmed it. 0 Keltharian civilian deaths. 47 human casualties from toxic Exposure. As this video ended, Taman finally found his voice. Why? He asked. Why would they do this? Why would humans die for aliens they don't even know? Cato loaded the sixth file without answering. This one was labeled Last Stand, Outpost Delta 9, Multiple Species Defense. The footage showed a remote research station under attack by the same dark alien forces they had seen in the Kepler station recording. The station housed scientists from a dozen different species, including some that were traditionally hostile to each other. The human garrison at the station was tiny, fewer than 20 soldiers protecting over 300 alien civilians. When the dark forces arrived, evacuation was impossible. The research station was too far from any help to expect rescue. This is Commander Sarah Chen, a human officer was saying into the communication system. All evacuation routes are blocked. We're going to make our stand here. Commander, replied a voice from off-screen, you have insufficient forces to defend the station. Recommend immediate surrender. Negative, Chen replied calmly. We have alien civilians under our protection. Surrender is not an option. What followed was the most intense battle any of the students had ever witnessed. The human soldiers didn't just defend the research station, they turned it into a fortress. They used scientific equipment as weapons, research data as tactical intelligence, and the station's own structure as a fighting platform. But more than their tactical brilliance, what stunned the watching students was the humans' absolute refusal to abandon the alien civilians. Even when positions became untenable, even when retreat would have saved human lives, they continued fighting to protect people from species that had never been allied with Earth. Look at the species mix, Dal said, pointing at the civilian scientists on screen. There are Vorthak, Keltharians, Grundians, even some Xerians. Half of those species have never even been friendly to humans. And the humans are dying for them anyway, added Nara. The battle lasted for 18 hours. By the end, only 5 human soldiers remained alive, still fighting to protect the alien civilians in the station's central laboratory. They had held off forces that should have overrun the station in the first hour of combat. Final log entry, Commander Chen was saying as the recording neared its end. She was badly wounded, her equipment was failing, and enemy forces were breaking through the final defensive positions. All civilian personnel secure in Central Lab. Defense of this position no longer sustainable. Implementing thermal protocol. Commander, came a voice from the laboratory, one of the alien scientists. You don't have to do this, you could surrender, they might spare you. Chen smiled, her face covered with blood and soot. Ma'am, we're human. We don't surrender when civilians are counting on us. The thermal protocol turned the research station's power core into a massive bomb. The explosion destroyed the station, the enemy forces, and the 5 remaining human defenders. But it also created a massive energy pulse that summoned nearby patrol ships. The alien civilians were rescued 6 hours later. 0 civilian casualties, Dal read from the final report. All 312 alien scientists survived. Complete destruction of hostile forces. Total human casualties, 27 dead. The presentation room was silent for several minutes after this video ended. Finally, Cato spoke up. There's one more file, he said quietly. It's the most recent one, from just 4 months ago. Taman felt like he was drowning in shame and horror. Each video had shown the same pattern. Humans achieving impossible victories through tactics that were brilliant, selfless, and absolutely terrifying in their effectiveness. What's it called? He asked. Training Exercise Alpha Prime, Cato replied. This one actually is from the Academy. It's the incident that led to the human ban. The final video loaded, showing the Academy's most advanced combat simulation facility. A group of human cadets, including Jiho and Minji, were being briefed on a training scenario designed to be unwinnable. Your mission, the instructor was explaining, is to rescue alien hostages from a terrorist-controlled space station. You have limited resources, minimal intelligence, and hostile forces that outnumber you 10 to 1. The scenario is designed to test your decision-making under impossible circumstances. You are expected to attempt the mission, realize it cannot be completed, and execute a strategic withdrawal. But as the simulation began, it became clear that the human cadets had no intention of withdrawing. They approached the impossible scenario the same way their older siblings and fellow humans had approached real combat situations. They improvised, they adapted, they turned the simulation's own programming against itself. They used equipment in ways the designers had never intended. They found solutions that the Academy programmers had never imagined possible, and they succeeded. Not only did they rescue all the hostages, but they did it using tactics so creative and unconventional that they actually broke the simulation software. The training facility's computers couldn't process what the humans were doing. The simulation scenario was rewritten 7 times to try to stop them, Nara read from the technical notes. Each time, the human cadets found new ways to succeed. Eventually, the programmers gave up trying to create an unwinnable scenario. The aftermath was shown in the final part of the recording. Alien cadets who had witnessed the human training session were visibly shaken. Some were crying. Others were staring at the humans with expressions of... The presentation room remained silent for nearly 10 minutes after the final video ended. 12 alien students sat staring at the blank screen, trying to process the complete destruction of everything they had believed about humans. Taman was the first to move. He stood up slowly, walked to the front of the room and placed both hands against the wall as if trying to steady himself. His blue skin had turned pale, and his normally confident posture had collapsed into something that looked like defeat. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About everything." Nara looked around at the other students. Some were crying. Others appeared to be in shock. A few looked angry, though it was unclear whether their anger was directed at the Academy for hiding the truth or at themselves for believing the lies. "My people," Taman continued, his voice barely a whisper. "The Vorthak colony that was saved in the second video. Those were my people. My cousin lived in that settlement." He turned to face the group, his yellow eyes filled with shame. "I've spent weeks mocking the humans who died to save my own family. I called them primitive. I said they were too stupid for real military training." Dal stood up and put a gentle hand on Taman's shoulder. "We all believed the same things," he said. "The Academy told us humans were banned for being incompetent. We trusted that explanation. But we should have known better," Rock said, his rocky voice filled with regret. "We should have questioned why an entire species would be banned from training instead of just given extra help." Kato was still staring at his computer screen, reading through the technical reports attached to each video. "The casualty statistics are incredible," he said. "In every single operation, humans achieved objectives that other species rated as impossible. And they did it while taking casualties that would have broken any other military force." "They never retreated," Nara observed. "Even when retreat would have been logical, even when retreat would have saved lives, they never abandoned their missions. Or the people they were protecting," added another student. "Even when those people were from species that had never been allied with Earth." The implications of what they had witnessed were staggering. For months, they had mocked humans as primitive warmongers who couldn't control their violent impulses. But the footage revealed something far more disturbing. Humans who fought with such tactical brilliance and selfless determination that other species couldn't psychologically handle witnessing their methods. "We need to tell the other students," Dal said. "Everyone needs to know the truth." "Do they?" asked a quiet voice from the back of the room. It was Yuki, the Delphian student who rarely spoke during group discussions. "Do other species really need to know how terrifyingly effective humans are in combat?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Now that they understood the real reason for the human ban, they could see the Academy's dilemma. How do you train other species alongside beings who approach warfare with such intensity that their methods traumatize witnesses? "Maybe," Yuki continued, "the Academy was trying to protect us from knowledge that would change how we see warfare forever." "You mean they were protecting us from learning how to win?" Taman asked bitterly. "I mean they were protecting us from trying to become something we're not," Yuki replied. Look at what happened to the alien cadets who witnessed human training sessions. Some had nightmares. Others became dangerously aggressive trying to copy human tactics. Nara considered this. But is it fair to ban humans from training just to protect other species from being disturbed by their excellence? Is it fair to expose other species to methods of warfare that could psychologically damage them? Yuki countered. The debate continued for another hour as the students wrestled with the implications of their discovery. Some argued that the truth should be revealed, that all species deserve to learn from human tactical innovations. Others, worried that exposing other aliens to human combat methods might have dangerous consequences. As dawn approached, they finally reached a decision. They would approach the Academy administration directly and request that the human ban be reconsidered. But they would also recommend that any future integration of humans into training programs include psychological preparation for other species. We need to be careful about how we handle this, Cato warned as they prepared to leave the archives. We still broke into classified files. The Academy could expel all of us. Then we'll face the consequences together, Taman said firmly. It's better than letting this injustice continue. They spent the next few hours carefully cleaning up any evidence of their unauthorized access to the files. Cato used his technical skills to cover their digital tracks, while the others made sure the presentation room showed no signs of their night-long viewing session. As they prepared to leave the archives building, Nara stopped suddenly. Wait, she said. There's something we need to do first. What? Asked Al. We need to apologize, she replied, to Jiho and Minji, for everything we've said about them and their species over the past few weeks. The thought of facing the human students, after learning the truth about their capabilities, was daunting. How do you apologize for mocking someone whose older brother died saving 40,000 alien civilians? How do you explain that you called their species primitive when their sister sacrificed herself to rescue people from worlds they had never seen? But Nara was right. Before they could move forward with any plans to change Academy policy, they needed to make amends for their own behavior. They found Jiho and Minji in the cafeteria, eating breakfast at the same isolated table where they had been sitting since the ban was announced. The two humans looked up in surprise as 12 alien students approached them together. Jiho, Taman said, his voice shaking slightly. Minji, we owe you an apology. The humans exchanged glances. An apology for what? Jiho asked. For everything, Nara replied. For mocking you, for supporting the ban, for believing that your species was too primitive for military training. Minji's eyes narrowed. What changed your minds? Taman took a deep breath. We saw the footage, he admitted. We broke into the Academy archives and watched the classified recordings of human military operations. Both humans went very still. What footage? Minji asked quietly. Kepler Station, Dal said. Operation Crimson Dawn. The Sanctuary Crisis. All of it. Jiho closed his eyes and was quiet for a long moment. When he opened them again, they were filled with pain. You saw my brother, he said. It wasn't a question. We saw him save 40,000 people. Taman replied. We saw him volunteer for a mission that everyone knew was suicide. We saw him buy time for civilian evacuations by holding impossible defensive positions. And we saw your sister, Nara added, looking at Minji. We saw her lead rescue operations that saved an entire Vorthak colony. We saw her treat alien civilians like they were her own family. Minji's hands were clenched into fists on the table. And now you understand why we were banned, she said bitterly. Not because we're incompetent, but because our methods scare other species. Your methods don't scare us, Taman said firmly. Your effectiveness does. Your willingness to die for strangers does. Your ability to achieve impossible victories does. The Academy was wrong to ban you, Dal added, and we were wrong to support that decision. Jiho and Minji looked at each other for a long moment, silently communicating in the way that close friends often do. Finally, Jiho spoke. What do you want from us? He asked. We want to help you get the ban overturned, Nara said. We want to petition the Academy to let you back into combat training, and we want to learn from you." "Learn what?" Minji asked. "How to be better soldiers," Taemin replied. "How to think creatively under pressure. How to turn impossible situations into victories. How to never give up when people are counting on us," added Rock. Over the following days, word of their discovery spread quietly through the student body. The 12 aliens who had viewed the footage became advocates for human reinstatement, sharing carefully selected details of what they had learned while respecting the classified nature of the full recordings. The Academy administration was initially furious about the security breach, but as more students came forward requesting that humans be allowed back into training programs, they realized that the truth could no longer be suppressed. A formal review was conducted. The classified footage was declassified and shown to student representatives from every species. The psychological impact was significant. Some students were indeed disturbed by the intensity of human combat methods, but the overall response was one of respect and desire to learn. The human ban was officially lifted 6 weeks later, but the new policy included mandatory psychological preparation sessions for all non-human students, who would be training alongside humans. Students had to understand that human approaches to warfare were fundamentally different from their own. Species methods. Jiho and Minji returned to combat training, but they were no longer isolated. They found themselves surrounded by alien students who wanted to understand human tactical thinking. Training sessions became collaborative efforts where different species learned from each other. Taemin became one of their closest allies. The shame of his earlier behavior had transformed into fierce loyalty and determination to make amends. He spent hours learning human tactical concepts and became skilled at